Much. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today and for bearing with us through the Zoom hiccups and the virtual life of the pandemic. We're so glad to be here with y'all today. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are going to be chatting with y'all today about dealing with stress, self-care, substance abuse, and the pandemic.
So it's nice to meet everyone. My name's Tavala. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second year in the CSP master's program. I am the Wellness Connection and Student Employment GA for Recreation and Wellness, and I'm a super huge theater nerd, and I have two adorable cats. This is their Halloween picture. We put them in their costumes. They were a dragon and a princess.
So precious. And my name is Morgan Alexander Coster. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a first-year student in the College Student Personnel Master's Program. I'm also a graduate assistant in the Wellness Connection with the Recreation and Wellness Department. And I really enjoy cooking, baking, and playing with my cat and dog, who are listed there and pictured. They are quite cute. And I would love to chat about them if you ever see me on the street. So we are going to do some poll everywhere during this session. So if you are able, this is going to be a great way for us to communicate with y'all through this platform. So if you're able to access it on your computer or your mobile device using this link here, you can click or just type it on in to your browser, or you can text here and it should give you the same options. We're going to get started with that with just one different screen. All right, so can everybody see what we're seeing? I'm going to go ahead and it's open. So once you're ready, you can go ahead and tell us how you're feeling. I'll know that you can see it once we start getting in some responses.
Morgan, if we're having any issues, it says that only registered participants may respond to the poll. If anyone, if any of the students on this right now can DM us in the chat and tell us if that's happening for you too. Yeah, it's making you make an account. I see that. Okay, well, we can freeball this, and if you guys want to just put it in the chat, I will respond verbally with it, and Morgan can ask the questions. We still want to make sure that we do that check-in with you, and we get to know you guys a little bit better. We're just rolling with the technology competencies here and figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first question is just, how are you feeling today? We just can be a couple words, can be a sentence. We just want to hear how your day's going, if you're enjoying the conference, how you're feeling with the current world. We just want to check in.
Good, we got a pretty good. I don't know if everyone can see it, but All right, well, if you guys want to continue responding, I can also say that. We got another I'm doing good. How you guys doing? Well, we're rolling with it. We're getting some technical
Absolutely.
issues. We have some technical issues that we did not plan for, but you know what? That just perfectly goes with what we're talking about. So, with that being said, Morgan, are you okay if I
Yep,
start?
let's get rolling.
Cool. Okay, so we wanted to talk about and weave in the thread of leadership. Morgan and I were discussing how we need to be at our best to do our best for others. It's the whole thing of hurt people hurt people. We need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so we can put our best foot forward, not only for the people that we love and our friends that we have, but anytime that we're being a leader in a situation. I absolutely love this quote. So lead by example, practice what you preach or don't preach at all. Walk the talk. People watch what you do more than they listen to what you say. Basically, just make sure that you are being an authentic and credible leader and making sure that you're holding yourself accountable for what you're saying. And that if you guys can just silently reflect, how you guys feeling as a leader right now? Now, we have everything going on politically. We have the pandemic. We have stress. We have school. We just want to give you guys a little bit of time to reflect in your head of how you guys doing as a leader currently. And Morgan, whenever you're good. So the big question is, because you're at this virtual leadership conference, how are you going to lead in the world today? We put some tips and tricks on the slide for us. I know it might be a little bit hard for some people to see, so I'm going to try to verbalize it as much as possible. But the big four: embrace diversity, communicate, think with the big picture, and adapt. So embracing diversity. Different minds are better than more of just the same. Not just diversity of genders, nationalities, but differences of experiences, generations, and opinions. A big thing of what I teach in my leadership course is to talk about how the power of the group and power of learning leadership and learning followership. You can't be a great leader until you learn how to be a good follower. And the way that you can do that is by paving the way with having diverse perspectives in your group. Next is communicate. We're going to ask you to act with a global mindset. Now, this would be you guys reaching out and trying to speak different languages, a willingness to learn and experiment from those around you, developing sensitivity, empathy, and open-mindedness. Now, this is where we're going to ask you to act with respect for others and to not expect people with different identities to teach you, but for you to go out and actually obtain that information on your own. Now, people can point you in specific directions, which is always great, but it always hits a little bit different if someone tries to meet you where you are at. The next thing is going to be thinking with the big picture. So get out of your comfort zone and anticipate some changes in this competitive environment. You're not operating in a different world than expected, and you must work to understand society as it changes. This is where being curious comes back in. We can't expect what's coming from the pandemic. Every day is a new day, and who knows what that's going to bring. So this is really where the curiosity plays in as a leader. You don't have to be ready for all the changes, because sometimes you won't be ready, but that doesn't mean that you can't get your mind in a place where you can be adaptive. And this really where it goes into adapt your leadership style. What we know about leadership is always evolving. It's a fairly new field. And there's always new research coming out, and there's always new people teaching, and there's always new studies. We're going to ask you to move from authority to trust, from hierarchy to networking, and from decision making to inspiration. This is the power of self-awareness, and just once again tying back into the credibility of yourself as a leader. And this is one of my favorite things. We rise by lifting others. It's not just communication, it's collaboration. This is really all of those last couple points I had wrapped up in a nice bow. I think that this is a great mantra that I have during the pandemic, and I think that it would be very important for people to just reflect on.
So with that, we just want to chat a little bit about the fact that, you know, we are in a pandemic. So this is an unprecedented time, one of our favorite buzzwords, you know. I think that we all are doing things and hearing things and living through things that we've never imagined. And something that plays into that is the fact that we are all experiencing collective trauma. So a traumatic event is defined as a perceived or real threat over our personal safety, health, and lives. And regardless of the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on you individually as of now, this may be something that you're feeling. You could feel scared for your health. You could be scared for your financial security. You could be scared about the progression of the semester and how it may be impacting your mental health and your academic success. Through all of that, the point of knowing that we are experiencing collective trauma is to know that, as our graphic says, it's okay to not be okay. We are experiencing something unprecedented, and as much as we've used the word, it's true. None of us expected this. None of us anticipated that we would be living in a virtual world. None of us expected that we would be hearing about the hundreds of thousands of tragic losses across the country. None of us expected this to happen to us. And so for that reason, we are experiencing trauma, and it's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel those feelings. So with that fact that we know that we are experiencing trauma and we are all under a great deal of stress outside of the ordinary, these are some things that you might expect and you might be experiencing in your own life and then seeing it in your friends and family. So you might be scared or worried about your health, the health of your loved ones, maybe your parents, grandparents, maybe friends or family that have medical conditions that make them more susceptible to COVID-19. You may be scared for your financial situation or job. Maybe you work in the food service industry or another tourism or people-facing industry, and that has been really hard and affected by the pandemic. Or maybe you've lost some support services that you rely on. Maybe your financial aid has been impacted. Maybe you're used to going to a food bank with your family and they're experiencing some pretty hard times right now as well. So maybe that's something that's happening. You might be having trouble sleeping or sleeping a lot more. That could be either end of the spectrum. Or you could be feeling very hungry and like you can't get enough to eat, or like the thought of food makes me sick and I just don't want to eat. You could be having trouble concentrating or being a bit more forgetful than usual. You might be seeing that play out in your conversations with friends, maybe not remembering things that they said, or you could see it in your schoolwork. Maybe you're just having trouble remembering content and material in class. Hypervigilance is something that I think a lot of people might be feeling right now. You know, there's hand sanitizer everywhere. We're all wearing our masks, and lots of people are being very careful about the social interactions that they choose to have, the places that they choose to go, and the activities they choose to engage in. The worsening of mental health conditions. This is something that I think that we've talked a lot about on campus and we'll continue to talk about, how being isolated during this pandemic may be contributing to a worsening depression. Maybe you're feeling depression for the first time. Maybe your anxiety has been really high for the first time, or maybe it's something you've been dealing with for a while and this is just not helping. Maybe it's making it worse. And that's something that is totally normal in this stress and trauma reaction. And then another thing is the increased use of tobacco or alcohol and other substances, sort of as a coping mechanism. And the people who might be more at risk for these behaviors are anybody at higher risk for COVID-19. So older people, people with underlying medical conditions, some folks who have racial or ethnic marginalized identities might be experiencing higher levels of pandemic stress and trauma, people who live in group settings or people who live in isolated settings, and then folks who also have substance abuse disorders or other existing mental health conditions.
I think this really brings us into what Morgan was talking about, the substance use and abuse. I'm pretty sure most people would agree with me. Please DM in the chat if you have like specific examples or things that you think that would be pertinent to what we're about to say. But TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all of it, even Snapchat, really almost glorifies the use of alcohol, drugs, or other substances, or even vaping as a coping mechanism. And we want to just spread some awareness about that. It is not Morgan's or I's job in the Wellness Connection to say yes or no to things, but to educate the student population of BG on this topic. So I'm going to read out the quotes. Alcohol sales in stores were up 54% in late March. This is of this year compared to that time, compared to last year, while online sales were up 500% in late April. According to a study of 2,200 US adults conducted in early April, 16% of all adults said that they were drinking more during the pandemic. We have higher rates among young adults. 1 in 4 millennials and nearly 1 in 5 Gen Xers said that they upped their alcohol intake. And anxiety isn't the only thing fueling the pandemic. As people work from home and self-isolate, they experience loneliness and boredom, 2 more potential triggers for excessive alcohol use. We know that we cannot say exactly what the reasons are for stress, anxiety, and whatnot in the pandemic, but we do think we've covered a lot of bases. But also there's a million and one reasons why we could be feeling stressed right now or feeling anxious right now. And that's understandable, like Morgan said. However, there is a difference between self-soothing and self-care. We're just trying to educate you as fellow students because we care. And I do think it's important that if you are seeing all this social media input, to either speak out or just educate yourself or others on how that might not be the most effective way to take care of yourself during the pandemic. With that being said, I think it's important to talk about the specifics of alcohol and mental health. So we told you that the alcohol intake during the pandemic is skyrocketing, both for people of age to drink alcohol and people below the age of 21 to drink alcohol. But it's important to say, like, why is that bad? Like, why is that concerning? Why could that potentially harm you? So alcohol can have a major impact on mental health. It's a depressant. So basically it slows your body down and it changes the chemical makeup in your brain. It alters your mood, energy levels, sleeping patterns, concentration, memory, and many other things. And if you're already experiencing this because of the anxiety in the pandemic, this is only going to worsen it. Like it said, it is a depressant. It's going to leave you with less energy. Alcohol also reduces inhibitions and impacts decision making. These can be positive or negative. It's also linked with increases in risky behavior, aggression, self-harm, suicide. And people typically self-medicate with alcohol, which is why we were bringing this up during the topic of the pandemic. Times get tough, and it's kind of been a societal trend to turn to alcohol when that happens. So there is frequent or heavy alcohol use can increase these effects that I've just noted and especially impact mood and the ability to cope. And I think that that is the most important part of this slide. It affects the ability to cope. And what we're trying to do is give you the tools to be able to cope with all the nonsense that's going on. And then finally, people who are experiencing hard times may use alcohol, like we said, to manage what's going on. This may make things better in the short time, but in the long run, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for you guys to bounce back.
So with that, we talked a little bit about self-soothing, self-care, and how we can manage and cope through this pandemic long-term and short-term. So let's talk about this a little bit. I think a lot of folks have heard the term self-care. I think we throw that out a lot on campus. I think maybe your professors or maybe your student groups are telling you, make sure to practice self-care, make sure to practice self-care, and then they're telling you different ways you can practice that self-care. And I think that all of that is so important, and I'm so glad people are sharing that information, but I think there's a distinction that's important that we make. So self-soothing are coping mechanisms. So they're activities that make you happy and they provide comfort, or maybe you find them relaxing or just otherwise enjoyable. Self-soothing is something that we do in order to really stabilize our emotions and bring us back to a place where we feel capable and prepared to take on the harder self-care activities. Self-care activities are going to be ones that are designed really for long-term maintenance and thriving, really. It's about prevention and it's about problem solving. So they're the activities that we do before we get stressed or after we get stressed in order to solve the problems that are actually making us stressed, or do everything we can within our power and our responsibility to change. So it's important to note that they're both necessary and one can't really exist without the other. So none of the activities that we're talking about are lesser or greater. They're just two halves of one coin. And then another thing that I want to note is that self is included in a lot of these as if it's like an isolated or one person on your own activity. And that's not necessarily true. Self-care and self-soothing doesn't have to be a one-person job. I think we're a social culture, we're social people, and inviting other people into our self-soothing and self-care rituals can be really helpful and healing and help us to thrive in the long term. So self-soothing. So this is sort of the activities that are fun, relaxing, enjoyable. They're about comfort, they're about coping, they're about ensuring that our cup is full so that we can pour out when we go in to solve the problems or tackle the issues that are really hurting us. So things like taking bubble baths, the tasty treats that we might enjoy every now and then, aromatherapy, gratitude journals, watching our favorite comfort show. Mine is Parks and Rec. I don't know if anybody agrees with me. You can put it in the chat if you do. Coloring, face masks, knitting, making your favorite meal, anything that you find just really makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, centers you, gives you that, brings you back to zero, brings you back to a headspace where you feel like you can take on the world. These are things that you can be doing during the pandemic and during the before times and possibly the after times. I think these are things that you can do on your own in socially distant ways, but there are also things that you can do for self-soothing that might include other people. So maybe it's doing a watch party on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus, whatever's your jam, and getting your friends together and enjoying that camaraderie with them without having to be close. During the warmer months or warmer weather, it might be nice to join your friends for a socially distant picnic. Anything that brings you with your people that really make you happy and bring joy and happiness to your life, but making sure that we're still practicing good socially distant guidelines. Self-care during a pandemic and always. So this is something that might be a little bit more daunting or a little bit more hard to tackle if you haven't done those self-soothing things first. So these are things that are going to make it ensure that you are ready and you're tackling the problems or maintaining the well-being that you need to be a successful leader and human citizen on our planet. So things like practicing good hygiene, that might be making sure that if you're like slipping on your hand washing, maybe making sure you're washing your hands all the time, because we're washing our hands all the time. It's a big activity here in COVID times. So going to therapy, meditation, mindfulness, those are things that are going to help really ensure that you are not only feeling good every now and then from your self-soothing activities, but they're going to give you tools to maintain that mental well-being and to notice when you're falling back into those maybe stressful or traumatic behaviors. Exercise or just going outside, keeping moving. I know we're going to not be able to go outside soon here in Ohio, but I think maybe getting a a light that gives you light and mimics the sunlight, exercising, using those fun videos on YouTube of different like cardio dance or maybe yoga, Pilates, anything that you really enjoy, utilizing the rec center, things like that that are available to you that are going to make sure that you get your endorphins up when you're moving around to your ability, are going to make sure that your body stays well and your mind stays well as well. Things that are maybe a little bit harder to do, they're not as, they're things that involve other folks that could be difficult. So maybe keeping your boundaries, accepting ownership of your responsibilities, saying yes or no when you really need it, confronting difficult conversations through thoughtfulness and maturity. I think that those are things that we want to talk about as things that we know are important to maintaining a successful life and a successful leadership within ourselves. But I think that we sometimes struggle with that when we don't do our self-soothing things, or when we rely only on our self-soothing things. I think when we get into our problems, we say, I'm going to eat this mac and cheese and then I'm going to feel better. But when we eat that mac and cheese, maybe the tough conversation we have to have with our boss is still there, or with a friend or with a family member. Maybe we're still really overcommitted with our schoolwork and our social activities and our extracurriculars. Maybe we are having trouble in an intimate relationship and we don't want to have that hard conversation with a partner. Or maybe we are really scared and anxious about the election or the pandemic, or there are things that we maybe don't feel like we have so much control over. Self-care is going to ensure that you have the opportunity to address those problems and look for solutions within your reach. Self-soothing is going to get you to a place where you feel that those activities are manageable, even if they're still scary. I think the key with self-care is doing things that make you scared, even when you're scared. I think that having the confidence to do those things and knowing that I've set myself up for success, so I know that I can get through whatever comes, is the real key for self-care. Tavala, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just think that kind of tying it into a couple earlier slides, I think this is where communication is key. And also where Morgan said that like it's okay to not be okay. Making sure that you set boundaries for yourself in this time is really going to be a key to making sure that you're putting yourself first. Just because if you can't put yourself first and take care of yourself, we can't expect you to take care of other people or the people that you might need to take care of. With that being said, I do think that we need to hold ourselves accountable to taking care of one another on top of ourselves. So this might be just being like, hey, like I see that you've been like super lethargic lately. Doesn't seem like you've been wanting to hang out. Like I understand, and like we don't have to hang out, or we don't have to Skype, or we don't have to FaceTime, but like, do you need anything? Do you need to talk to someone? It doesn't have to be me. And just connecting others with those resources that you may or may not have. I think it's important to note that in the Wellness Connection, we have a lot of really good resources to give out. And we have a lot of good connections with different departments on campus and then other community organizations. I think that if anyone has any concerns or questions, definitely reach out to us and we can get you information. And then I'm a big supporter of the counseling center on campus. I think that there is no shame in talking to anyone, talking to a counselor whatsoever, even if you don't have something major that you think is in your head. It's always important to talk to someone and reach out for help. They're there to help you guys, and we have a very good relationship with them in our office. We do a lot of our self-care events with them and just other events in general. I think that BG has done a really good job of saying that students matter and students are the priority right now. However, we want to make sure that you guys are also reaching out, just because we don't want to overload everyone with information or stress anyone out. We want to make sure that we are connecting you with information that you want. We don't want to tell you what you need right now. With that being said, we have the ability to unmute people if anyone has questions, we would love to have just a dialogue with like, how are you guys doing now? Do you have any information or any input on what we've talked about? We just want to get some dialogue going. If you guys put your name in the chat, I can give you permission to unmute.
I'm also looking, and if you raise your hand, we can allow you to speak.
Yeah, I think the last thing that Morgan and I want right now is to just like constantly spew information at you guys. We want to make sure that this is a dialogue piece and we're giving you guys what you need.
I would love to, I saw one of you added some of your favorite self-soothing activities into the chat, which I thought was super great. I would love to hear some other ideas people have for self-soothing, maybe some socially distant ideas. I know I'm always looking for ways to connect with people during this time. All right, so Julia likes to go to Falcons After Dark. That's excellent. I think it's really great to utilize the different activities that are happening on campus. That way you know that they are socially distant. We're following COVID guidelines. We are ensuring that y'all are safe, and we are doing everything we can to make sure that your health is a priority. And so going to those school-sponsored events is a great way to ensure that those guidelines are going to be in place. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I think adding into that, just checking up on the campus update as well. I know a lot of departments have really made it a priority to get information out to you guys, and just following up and just like sifting through if you have time at the end of your day or before you're going to bed, just like, oh, there's an event this Saturday, like it's free. I can do it virtually or I can go in person. I think getting out of like our small rooms or our houses or anywhere we've been staying for the last several months is super beneficial, just because I tend to go a little crazy if I'm in the same place for too long. And I know that interacting with people like face to face always helps me.
Yeah, and in addition to those more social activities that are in the campus updates, something else that's in there are really great volunteer opportunities and ways to plug into the community. And I think talking about what Tavala mentioned about caring for our community, in addition to that self-care, I think that's a really great way to get involved with the community here in Bowling Green and in Wood County. I think that part of once we have achieved, or while we are working to achieve that self-care and reaching a place where we feel that we can tackle our own struggles or our own challenges, I think that being able to devote some of our time and energy to the struggles and challenges that our community is facing is a really great way to use that energy that you get from self-soothing. And it's also, I think, sometimes a form of self-care in knowing that the community that you are in is being uplifted through the actions, and that when you take care of them, they'll take care of you as well.
I think important part of that piece, while you guys are still sending us messages via the chat, is how do we become student activists and student activist leaders during the pandemic? I think that it's just really getting creative, like we talked about, and being adaptive to what's going on. You have the opportunity now, especially with the changing times, like we said, the election, several different movements going on, etc. Like the students are activists today, and activists are students today, and it's important to, regardless of the pandemic, still make sure that your voice is known and that you're standing up for what you believe in, while also putting safety first. Now, I think that that's just, like we said, looping back in the creativity. How are you being safe and still being an activist leader in your community?
Yeah, and so with that, I think a question that I would love to have answered by y'all is, where do you see this differentiation between self-soothing and self-care play into your ability to be student leaders? So how does that impact your ability to lead? Can y'all give me an example of a time in your life where maybe some self-care helped you be a better leader, or maybe some leadership practices that you want to implement, or self-care practices that you want to implement moving forward to help better your leadership skills?
I think while you guys are responding to this in the chat, what I do specifically is, as a graduate student, I have a unique position of both teaching students, working in the recreation center, and overseeing and advising students while also being a student myself. I think one of the biggest things is when I go home, making sure that I'm not constantly picking up my work with me, making sure that I devote it to my partner and to my two cats and my hamster that I have, and just making sure that they can help recharge me and I help recharge them so I can present myself fully the next day to all of my duties and times that uh, I'm being required at. And I see Madison said taking time to be present. I definitely think that that is a number one. Um, I think on the same vein, like showing up while also making sure that you take time for yourself. It's kind of a double-edged sword, and you have to have an internal dialogue with yourself, because sometimes like you just can't show up, and you need to take time to just like reflect, do you relax, whatever. And then sometimes you really need to push yourself off that ledge and say, hey, like I might not want to go, but I need to go. It will help me in the long run, and it'll help all the people that I care about in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing when to say yes and when to say no is a skill that is certainly learned over time and is deeply personal to each individual. I think there's no shame in saying yes and no shame in saying no. I think that part of that takes a real maturity to know what you are able to give, and when what you're going to give is going to be your best, or it's going to be what you can give at the time. And I think it also takes maturity to know when it's important to be respectful of other people's time, which is always. I think that if you're going to show up, you want to respect other people's time and be present and be motivated to contribute to that environment in the most positive way that you're able to. It looks like Julia chatted to us and she said that that's great. It's okay to be stressed out for sure. I think that a lot of times we live in a culture where we're pressured to be okay and happy all of the time. And I think being honest with ourselves and with our friends is going to be that culture shift to saying, you know, I'm not okay and that's all right. And here are the steps that I'm going to take in order to get back to a place where I feel like I can be a good contributor.
I definitely agree with you, Morgan, and definitely Julie and Madison, Mackenzie. Thank you guys for adding all this in the chat. We appreciate you guys. I think that it's really important in the same vein to not expect your friends or the people that you care about or the people that you're surrounded with to be a-okay or during this time. I think that setting the expectation that it's a work in progress is a really good neutral stance to have in the pandemic. And because we don't know when everything's gonna quote unquote end. If it does, I do believe that our culture is going to be shifted permanently. We just don't know how because we're still riding this out together. I think it's important, however, to make sure that if you are saying yes, it is understandable if your best is a 6 out of 10 that day. Completely understandable with the circumstances going on. But making sure that you are standing by your word when you do say yes and making sure that you do stand by your own individual sense of credibility because once again, with the nature of leadership, if you say yes, people are going to set that expectation on you to complete what you say or to do what you say. Now, that would just have to be like, if that can't happen for you, just having that conversation and saying, like, hey, I said yes, I'm going to try my best. I might need a little bit of help. And that's where that collaboration effort really adds into us. And then someone said, I live in a room by myself, so sometimes I get lonely. I'll tell myself I need to go out when I'm invited just to better my mental health. I definitely hear you, Mackenzie. That is really hard for me to do. I live with my partner. I think Morgan's Wi-Fi is out. But I hear you, Mackenzie. I live with my partner and they actually go to Detroit most of the week. So I'm kind of alone with my cats most of the time. It's very hard for me to say, like, yes, the friend A or whatever, who I don't want to use names, but I want to go out, but I just can't. Like, that's totally understandable. But I also really think that I need to get better personally at like pushing myself out there and actually trying to go out a little bit more. Just because sometimes I feel like I excuse myself and it ends up just hurting my mental health in the long run. And thank you guys. I see thank you for the presentation. Thank you guys. It's a little difficult. I know it's sometimes a little bit awkward if we can't see you guys face to face. But we're working with it. We've had some Wi-Fi issues. We had some login information issues, but we really enjoy this conversation. And we really want to make sure that as fellow students, we're here supporting you guys and that we're coming from a place of understanding. And someone said they also go on walks with friends just to get out of your room with stress and everything. I definitely think that that is super beneficial. I put harnesses on my cats and we go out for walks and it's super funny. If you guys ever go to Petco, we're probably there. They love wearing their costumes. They love wearing like their little shirts and stuff out. So I do enjoy going on for walks, especially with my pets. Morgan, I know your Wi-Fi went out. Do you have anything to say?
I have no idea what happened. Yeah, I think that things that I really enjoy in terms of self-soothing or cooking and baking for my friends and for my family. I think that I really enjoy the meditative process of it, but I also enjoy the actual giving of the food to the people that I care about. I think that those two things in tandem really bring me a lot of comfort and joy. And so then the self-care aspect of that might be making sure that I'm eating the vegetables in addition to the cookies and the bread and things that I like to bake and eat. And I think that I really enjoy watching my Parks and Rec often, or Criminal Minds, as I've currently been watching. But I think going for a walk, like you mentioned, or just being really intentional about moving off of the couch, out of bed, finding ways to engage my mind outside of the television or a screen, which since we spend so much time in front of a screen these days and in Zoom meetings and Zoom class. And I think that that has been very beneficial to me in terms of keeping me fresh and alert and maintaining my well-being over time.
Love it. Well, we just wanted to say, with the last couple minutes left of our session, thank you guys for attending. We really appreciate all the dialogue that you've offered us, and just reaching out and offering some opinions, some suggestions, and whatnot. We like talking with you guys, and we really appreciate you guys attending. Oh, we also have a visitor.
We have a new attendant to the meeting. We have my cat, who was featured in the photo, and now he's featured in life. So exciting. One of the best perks of Zoom school and Zoom work, I think, for sure. But yeah, thank you all so much for being engaged and for chatting with us in the chat, and really wanting to be here and learning about self-care and how we can implement it during the pandemic in a healthy way. We appreciate your time. I hope that you enjoyed the rest of your day, and the rest of the sessions were just as enjoyable and informational for y'all. I know that taking time out of your Saturday to learn about leadership is a really great indicator and says a lot about all of your character, and the leaders that we have on Bowling Green's campus. So I'm super grateful for all of y'all.
Thank you guys.